Hello and welcome back to the finals of the World Championship in Through the Ages. In the game that we have seen in the last video, Kyshantry was able to defeat A440 in the first one of the two-player games. But even with that win, Kyshantry still has some work to do. He needs 2 more wins or a win and a tie to be able to win the World Championship, while A440 only needs 1 win. So let's see if in this game maybe the World Championship will already be decided, which would be the case if A440 wins the game, or if Kyshantry gets another win, and with that will have the chance to maybe make it a nice comeback possible in the last two-player game. Alright, and now without further ado, let's take a look at the game. First of all, we can take a look at the leaders and wonders. There is Hollywood in the game, which is always an important wonder in two-player games, but not a single theater leader in H3. There is, however, Bach, Shakespeare, Darwin, and Gaudi in H2. A lot of culture leaders in H2. It could definitely become a culture fest. There is Pierre in H3, some lab leaders, Gandhi, and the Manhattan Project for the military. We have the Suez Canal in the game, but no James Cook. There's Maria Theresa, but no ocean liner service. Napoleon has a strong military counters. There also Joan of Arc and Shishka as military action leaders in H1. Nostradamus to help with the strength. We have Michelangelo together with Machu Picchu, St. Peter's Basilica, Great Wall could be interesting. And maybe Eleanor and Isabella for colonization setup. And there's also the Acropolis in the game, but not on the row yet. Let's see if that wonder will be revealed and if one of the players will take it. Kyshantry is in the first position, and he interestingly starts by taking this Richland A. Maybe wants to leave the door open to get potentially Confucius at the next turn. Maybe A440 could be inclined to take Aristotle plus a yellow card. However, I think I in his position would maybe just go for Confucius, as I think he's just extremely strong in two-player games, and Homer or Sun Tzu for 2 civil actions wouldn't be ideal. So let's see how that will play out. I-440 indeed goes for Confucius. Let's see if Kyshantry just goes for Homer, or if he is actually willing to pay an additional civil action for Sun Tzu, who can serve as a nice counter against Confucius. However, Kyshantry goes for Homer, builds a mine, doesn't increase his population. Interestingly, instead he takes the urban growth and then also takes the Colosseum. That's an interesting choice by him. First of all, I personally am not the biggest fan of the Colosseum in two-player games, and maybe would have just gone with the Stonehenge, even though I think that one is maybe also not as strong in two-player games as in other player counts. However, Kyshantry, of course, has to expect that maybe A440 will now go for the Acropolis for 2 civil actions, and if that is the case, then maybe going for a bit of military counterplay could be interesting, and with that, maybe the Colosseum can serve as a nice wonder, but Homer and the Colosseum a bit not the setup that I would like to have, so no, but let's see what he can do with it. Taking the urban growth can maybe be fine in the next turn. When being in first position, it can sometimes be the case that you don't have that much to do with your civil actions anyway. Nonetheless, I think maybe in two-player games it's also important to be prepared to maybe take some important key cards like Code of Laws and Early Iron or something. So I'm not sure if I agree with that, but I think it can be fine, especially in first position. Let's see if A440 will go for the Acropolis for 2, with him being a bit of a military player. Of course, it could also be fine for him to maybe just aim towards the Colossus for the next turn. As you can see, he actually doesn't go for the Acropolis here, takes this urban growth, and we might see a Colossus at the next turn. Also, there's a printing press coming down the row, which A440 or Kyshantry could potentially go for, with Shakespeare, Darwin, and Gaudi in the game. That could be a strong game for printing presses. Kyshantry goes for Mare, increases population 2 times, builds the second lab, and I think there is not really an interesting card available for 1 civil action. Could have maybe taken printing press or something for 2, or maybe a leader already, but I think taking the urban growth A at the end worked out quite fine for him here. Let's the iron stay on 3 civil actions, so might have a chance to take that copy at the next turn. A440 seats opens the development of politics with some additional draws for both players. Thanks to the science from Confucius, A440 has enough science to go into printing presses immediately with Shakespeare in the game. That's just, I think, very strong, and now he can build one directly without having committed to the second lab yet, and with the last civil action he will take the frugality and doesn't want to go into consumption yet. Now it's Kyshantry's turn. He seeds and opens the development of planning, and as you can see, the options for that are the development of religion, settlement, and science. So definitely some interesting developments. Kyshantry chooses the development of science, which allows him to already go for an iron upgrade this turn if he would like to do this, and he goes for that. Let's see if he also wants to already start using Homer's resource, but maybe best to not commit to an additional warrior yet, depending on what tactics he might draw. A440 seeds. He didn't go for the Colossus at the last turn. Maybe he wants to go for an H1 wonder, and that's a bit of a coincidence. All of the H1 wonders are in the 2 civil action area. I think we have a very special moment here reserved for potentially the deciding game of the World Championship. Yeah, I think the chance for that to happen is extremely low, so take a look at this wonderful wonder row and the 2 civil action area. Then A440 plays the frugality, could just go for another printing press, which I think would be a very fine move. He indeed does just that, increases the science production, gets already a solid amount of culture production going, will take that copy of Knights over the Swordsman, could have a nice tactic for them already in hand potentially, and yeah, and with that has the option to maybe build some military in case Kyshantry will at some point do something with the Colosseum. Kyshantry seeds, the development of civil life is revealed. With that, the event deck is actually already flipped, with both players having seeded 2 events, and Kyshantry maybe just will increase his population with the development of civil life, goes for 1 iron upgrade, takes the Swordsman, will develop it. With that can also start using Homer's resources, goes for another iron upgrade, and can now go for that upgrade, also making him stronger in case he or maybe A440 have seeded some strength events. Then that could also make it that if A440 wants to use Confucius now, which he normally would like to do, there's a chance that he might get hit by a strength event. So let's see if there will be something bad revealed, or if A440 is actually not willing to push, which could be an indicator that maybe he himself also has maybe seeded something strength related. I'm not sure if I would be willing to miss out on pushing if my events would be safe. So that could be an indicator that A440 has gone for some potentially damaging events, strength related events, and he will build a knight now. Has he the medieval army tactic? Yes, going up to 5 strength, with that maybe having some chances to keep the strength lead. He takes St. Peter's Basilica here, builds a step. Normally I would say the Code of Laws could be an extremely important technology here. However, with him being on bronze mines, maybe wanting to have the happy face from the St. Peter's Basilica very soon, I do think the Engineering Genius could be a very valid alternative here. Also with Kyshantry not having really that much science in reserve to be able to go for the Code of Laws, so I'm interested to see what cards A440 will take. Maybe he will also just take 2 cards from the 1 civil action area, maybe Masonry and a yellow card or something. That will now be an interesting choice. And he goes for the Engineering Genius, which I think is a very solid choice, even though being stuck on a low amount of civil actions can be one of the big problems that you face in 2-player games. So let's see if he will potentially regret not having that Code of Laws available, but now he can finish the St. Peter's Basilica, and I think that will be helpful for him. The additional happy face will also help him maybe keeping the strength lead. Let's see if Kyshantry finds a way to overtake A440 in strength again. I guess he can just build 2 swordsmen if he would like to, and he also does exactly that. Is now at 6 strength, builds the step of the Colosseum, takes the knights, takes the Code of Laws, and he really needs that additional science from the cultural heritage. And I mean, he has a strong resource production now, and again the strength lead, meaning that if A440 is again not willing to push, he again misses out on a science from Confucius, not being able to use his leader. And again, he's not willing to push, which is interesting because let's see what he will do, but I suspect that he actually won't get stronger with now having built at first the second step of the St. Peter's Basilica, and then maybe it could be worthwhile. Maybe he seeded also rebellion or something. Yeah, let's see what those 4 events at the end will end up being. He finishes the St. Peter's Basilica, has now some very solid culture production, goes for the theocracy, but that alone is not enough to make him stronger, only ties in strength. So let's see if kyshantry has an event to push and if he will reveal something potentially strength related. He sees the barbarians are revealed, and that will indeed hit A440, who has the most culture, and loses the tiebreaker now, as that is considered the weakest. And I think losing that population might definitely be painful. He can get 1 population back, he has a free population, but nonetheless, without that, he might have now been able to soon go for 2 more medieval, or 1 more medieval army, 2 more units. Now he can only go for 1 more unit, which might really influence on if he can maybe take the strength lead or not. Kyshantry plays the cultural heritage, really invest into the code of laws, getting the 5th civil action, I think very important for him on one hand. On the other hand, he is then also extremely low in science, which can be problematic, but I guess he will go for it and then probably just finish the Colosseum, maybe take irrigation, or just increase his population, can maybe hope to get that copy of irrigation at the next turn. Builds another swordsman to get even stronger. But didn't reveal a tactic for them so far. Being on all of those swordsmen without any tactic is of course maybe not the most efficient way to build some strength, but at least he was able to use some additional resource from Homer. Speaking of Homer, kyshantry didn't replace him yet, meaning if A440 just takes 2 cards off the row and he could just take Drama and Eleanor, which both seem like solid choices for him, then the age will actually end, and kyshantry at the end didn't manage to replace Homer in time. Did of course get some resource out of him, but of course not the situation that you really want to have with having Homer. This time A440 was willing to cede and the Confucius event was revealed. He will increase his population, goes for Eleanor, elects her, goes for the drama, will make sure to end the age, which I think is what he definitely needs to do, and then he goes for the irrigation, which also is an important technology to not be in danger of being stuck on low population income. He's also at 19 culture already, going into age 2. Kyshantry is at 6 plus 0. But kyshantry wins another strength event. The foray is revealed, and I think that's an extremely important hit for him here, because with losing the happy face from Homer, he actually would face an uprising right now. But with being able to take 3 food from the foray, he will be able to increase his population, and with that not having to disband something. He will do it exactly that. What else will he do? Maybe just go for 2 irrigation upgrades. Probably wants to take the breakthrough, so let's see if he goes for an upgrade or if he just loads up on a bunch of cards. He goes for an upgrade. Will he go for a second upgrade, or is he valuing the breakthrough too highly? He goes for the second upgrade, which of course very likely will mean that he gets a new population out a turn earlier. Nonetheless, 2 science for civil action is such a good trade that I'm not sure if I would maybe at the end be willing to take the breakthrough and miss out on one of the upgrades. I think in this situation, kyshantry really needs a strong wonder. They are maybe not the strongest one available, but still, if he has a strong colony, maybe Suez Canal or Statue could be interesting, or even just the Louvre to get some culture reduction going. I think Ramblin' with the amount of happy faces is a bit tricky at the moment. Now, so let's see if he finds such a nice wonder, or maybe if he finds the opportunity to do a revolution at some point, because otherwise he might have some difficulties getting into a government form. A440 seats is Eleanor. The event revealed is the cultural influence, making his culture lead even bigger. He goes for the irrigation this turn, goes for an upgrade, takes the rich land of frugality. The justice system is coming down the road, which could end up being a nice technology for him, making sure that he's not stuck on 4 civil action with the theocracy. Kyshantry seeds and the new deposits are revealed, and that might have been seeded by him, even though the additional resources at this point might be more valuable to A440, because kyshantry, I think he will have some problems investing those and might just have corruption now. Let's see if he will find a way to get out of corruption. Also, again, 2 events seeded by each player. Kyshantry will now go for Nostradamus, maybe producing a bit of culture and getting some help with the strength. Takes the reserves and the efficient upgrade. and reveals the medieval army tactic, so didn't find an infantry tactic, which is of course not ideal for him, but at least even without it, he was able to win those strength events. 840 seats. A colony is revealed. Both players are actually bidding fairly high, but there is also the Suez Canal coming down the row, and kyshantry maybe knows that he probably needs a strong wonder right now. If he got a bit lucky, maybe he has already a strong H2 colony in hand, which definitely could make it that he is actually willing to pay quite a lot. Also with him having no infantry tactic, but being able to go for some medieval armies, maybe getting rid of some swordsmen could actually be quite strong for him. But he actually has some colonization cards, so only needs to send one swordsman away, and I'm very interested to see if he goes for the Suez Canal at the next turn. Also, there are some interesting cards coming down the road. Strategy, Republic, also Gaudi and Darwin. If AF140 plans on replacing Eleanor quickly, he goes for the Justice system, which feels definitely like the right move. And then maybe goes for an upgrade. Probably just takes a yellow card, I guess. And he will actually go for Maria and Electra already, interestingly. That's an interesting choice. I think Eleanor at this point could have still produced him quite a bunch of culture. 840, of course, still, like we have seen it so often, that doesn't really bother getting into iron here. So he just skipped on the iron again. Let's see if it will work out for him this time. He has some big culture reduction. Maria, of course, can then help him with some additional resources and science. So I think she will give him some nice value, but he has those dramas in hand, and considering that it is a two-player game, I'm not sure if maybe I would have been willing to wait for Bach or Shakespeare and just try to run away with the culture, but of course, maybe this game could potentially play out similar like the last one, kyshantry having some strong resource production and at some point being able to punish A440 militarily, and even without a strong culture leader, at this point A440 is running away with the culture and maybe will just wants to try on making sure that he has a way to get some solid amount of resources to build up more military. Let's see if he will take the strategy, a move that he maybe should have done in the last game, but I think in this situation it is understandable to skip it. Those two yellow cards offer some benefit, and kyshantry can of course take the strategy, but doesn't really have enough science to easily make use of it. Kyshantry Seeds, the event revealed, is a Confucius event together with the developed territory. He has now gained some additional science. Let's see if he is actually taking the Suez Canal, or if he doesn't have a nice colony or isn't willing to go for a gamble. He goes for the Suez Canal. Will he go for the strategy? He builds a step. Guess it might have been just too expensive. Builds an additional farm, builds up some production. Let's see if he will finish the Suez Canal already at the next turn. If he has developed territory 2 or the autonomous territory, that could be very big for him, because that could mean that he can go for the Republic one turn earlier. So those colonies might actually be the strongest for him in this situation. 840 seats, and the event revealed is the Knowledge of the Ancients, which is the better one for kyshantry. Also, he's just gone for the Suez Canal. Again, the players having a fair amount, or are sharing their spots in the event deck. Both players have seeded 2 events into the deck. And then 840 plays the Frugality, increases his population. See what he will do to get out of corruption. Builds a knight, interestingly, instead of another warrior. Maybe he has potentially the Hussars tactic in hand, or maybe still a heavy cavalry tactic. And a very interesting move here by A440. He actually goes for those selective breeding upgrades, which is something that looks quite odd at first. Normally, when you're learning the game, one of the advices that some players will give you is often that you shouldn't upgrade from H1 to H2 in any technology. And I do think that is true most of the times. Here, maybe there are some reasons why F140, why it could work out for him. First of all, it gives him the option to get out of corruption. Then he has Maria, and can then maybe get more activations out of her. And generally, when he still wants to develop those dramas, he has just some cheap buildings, can build some cheap units, and then it could just be most important to have as many population coming into the civilization as possible. So, of course, an unorthodox or a bit of a special move, but I think there are definitely some arguments that support the choice here. Goes actually for one upgrade with the efficient upgrade, so he's still not out of corruption, meaning he will actually go for a second upgrade, meaning he will just skip on the strategy, but it would take some time until he has accumulated enough science for it anyway. Maybe he doesn't want to necessarily go very aggressive here, or maybe he's hoping that he can go for some options in H3 for some more military actions if he should need it. For now he is on 3, so it's maybe fine to just make sure to get the food production going as quickly as possible. Then he will draw some cards. Kyshantry Seeds is at the moment the weakest, even with the Nostradamus strength, and that gets punished. The international negotiations are revealed. At least Kyshantry is able to choose what he wants to pay and pays some additional food to A440, something that he maybe can be somewhat fine with getting paying, but on the other hand, A440 with having Maria, of course, some additional food is quite nice, but I guess he definitely doesn't want to pay some science. Maybe could have paid some resource, but resource also are quite helpful for A440, so I guess at the end paying some food is probably fine. And as you can see, Kyshantry can actually develop the Republic peacefully already this turn, and that is of course because of the knowledge of the ancients that were revealed during A440's turn. So now Kyshantry doesn't necessarily need a colony that gives him additional science in order to go for the Republic one turn earlier, because he can already do it with the science from the knowledge of the ancients. He still wants to have more science, takes the revolutionary idea, which I think is an important pick for him. He at this point could just go for Bach and Opera, try to catch up in culture, and I mean with this big production can maybe build up towards a big Hollywood. I do think that looks like a very appealing option here, or he could of course go for something like Napoleon. Him taking that revolutionary idea, if he now wants to go for Bach and Opera, that would mean so that he delays the Suez Canal, so let's see if he is not finishing that wonder, or if he and then maybe goes for Opera and Bach if he's willing to miss out on that combination in order to finish the Suez Canal. He takes Bach, takes the Opera, and I think he kinda has to go for that here. Takes the wave of nationalism, builds another step of the Suez Canal, and can maybe finish that at the next turn. Now it's A440's turn. He seeds, the popularization of science is revealed. Both players don't really have the strongest science production, but A440 gets one more culture out of it. He can increase his population twice this turn, gaining some value out of Maria Theresa. Builds an additional knight, again indicating that he might have the Hussars tactic in hand, which could potentially put some pressure on Kyshantry. He then also goes for the navigation. Kyshantry will lose the Nostradamus strength soon, probably wants to start building some operas with Bach, but might actually now have to first be concerned about getting some military going. Kyshantry seeds with Nostradamus, and quite a potentially influencing event is revealed, the iconoclasm. This time it will lead to Kyshantry losing a civil action with not getting the civil action back when electing Bach, but it isn't revealed in H3, meaning Kyshantry will be able to keep Bach available for a long time, and A440 will be able to keep Maria. Kyshantry will then also go for Bach immediately, plays the revolutionary idea, goes for the Opera, builds one, takes the breakthrough, and a cavalryman. And yeah, I mean, he is starting some culture production now. Maybe slowly he can try to catch up. He has now a lot of civil actions, still a very low amount of science though. It's also interesting that so far he has delayed the Suez Canal. There is of course a chance that maybe he was willing to go for a bit of a gamble here and doesn't have a colony yet, or maybe he just preferred setting up the Opera first and really wanted to have both cavalryman and breakthrough. That of course can also be the case. Let's see if at the next turn he will finally finish it and what colony he will have available. A440 could have Kyshantry potentially maybe could have been vulnerable for an aggression here, but A440 goes for seeding an event, reveals the civil unrest. No player will lose any culture here. A440 can again increase his population one time actually. I thought for a moment that he had more food saved up. Maybe I was looking at Kyshantry's spot. He can increase his population once, takes the cannons, develops the cannons, and maybe building all of those knights was not because he had hussars in hand, but maybe rather because he has the mobile artillery in hand, and now he just can build a lot of cannons and actually gain a very significant amount of strength, making it difficult for Kyshantry to catch up in culture, and maybe also just generally creating problems for him to be able to defend against aggressions and wars. So let's see if A440 indeed has the tactic available, builds a cannon that is enough to get out of corruption, builds a religion interestingly, but he has the St. Peter's Basilica, so that will make sure that he has enough happy faces, even when he will now lose 2 yellow tokens to the end of the age. And then he has 1 civil action left. Won't develop the drama, but still as a culture lead can maybe build some more printing press, 1 more printing press if he needs some more culture production. And I guess he could maybe just play the reserves for either food and resources. And he will play it for food so that he can increase his population at the next turn. And he indeed reveals the mobile artillery tactic is now 20 strength, and who knows, can maybe pull an aggression or even a war. If he could declare war, go for another cannon, be at 28 strength, and then he would be really threatening. And I think actually at the end of A440's turn, H3 will start, meaning we can now take a look at the overview. Kyshantry, with A440 again having just skipped iron and coal, is the player with the bigger resource production, has way more civil actions, so those 2 are some very big benefits for him, but he's very low in science. Thanks to the Colosseum, he can actually go for the cavalryman already the next turn, which could potentially help him, making sure to defend against an aggression from A440. He will finish the Suez Canal, and if he didn't get unlucky and doesn't have a colony, that will give him a further economical boost. So he has some things running for him nonetheless, with A440 having the option to maybe just build cannon after cannon. I do think I could definitely see some problems on the horizon for Kyshantry. The best would maybe be if he has a colony that helps him with his population so that he can also just build a lot of units, but A440's military pressure might really distract Kyshantry from building up some very strong culture production. I guess he can always just upgrade a lab to opera, try to survive, but for now he also has to overcome a relatively big culture gap, and with his low science income, not knowing whether he has a good H2 tactic to work with that he can easily go for. Of course, he can also try to make a transition into the mobile artillery. I think in this position, I would rather play on A440's side. Of course, also heavily depending on what cards he has in hand. Does he have a war? Does he have an aggression? What are there some strength events coming? But generally, I do think A440's position has some potential here. Yeah, just 3 more cannons and he will be extremely threatening. However, there's Gandhi in the game, so that could of course be a factor that could save Kyshantry at the end, costing him of course also a bit of culture production compared to Bach. So I do think that could definitely go both ways from that point on, but maybe because of the culture lead and now having the option to apply some military pressure, I would rather choose A440 civilization here. Kyshantry finishes the Suez Canal, of course, that's also an important factor. Does Kyshantry have a strong colony or not? He has a colony, but it's only the wealthy territory too. And I don't think that's the colony that he really wants in the situation. Of course, more resources is not bad, but I think the resource production was really not a limiting factor for Kyshantry. Something like developed territory, inhabited, vast, of course also autonomous, could have been extremely helpful for him. Even historic too. The happy faces would be very helpful and he would close the culture gap. So he has a colony, that's good for him, but probably the one that he would like to have the least, and maybe also explaining why he delayed the Suez Canal by that much, hoping that he maybe would find a better colony. Or maybe he actually will use all of the resource to build some units, but that would surprise me. He will build 1 opera, upgrades a lab with the efficient upgrade. Maybe let's see if he will play the wave of nationalism. He builds 1 cavalryman. In the turn before, I think he also was an amount of strength behind so that he can defend with 2 defense cards. He is doing it again, so that kind of looks like he has 2 defense cards available. He then takes the cannons in hand. He's now very low in science, but he is starting some big culture reduction, so A440 has to do something about that, otherwise Kyshantry might just overtake him. A440, let's see if he'll go for a war or something. No, he cedes. The strategic territory is revealed. It could be an extremely important colony for both of the players, but maybe especially for A440, who could draw some wars and aggressions with that, maybe making it more likely that he can pull something off. He actually has the navigation, but it looks like he maybe wasn't willing to bid too much for that colony, and at the end Kyshantry is able to win it for just a swordsman. He has indeed the 2 H2 colonization cards that I was suspecting that he would have them. and even H3 colonization cards, so he wins that, gets some new draws, but has also now used some colonization cards, but he gets the 4 additional strength, and I think winning that colony, also with even having the Suez Canal, yeah, could be quite a big swing here for him. A440 will increase his population with Maria Theresa, builds another cannon, is now 28 strength, takes the frugality, just wants to make sure to get even more population going, takes the urban growth and a breakthrough. Doesn't take this first copy of Air Forces. There is actually already the Hollywood coming down the road. Let's see if Kyshantry will make sure to take that. Kyshantry will increase his population, takes the reserves, plays the wave of nationalism to build a cavalryman, destroys a lab, builds a swordsman. Let's see. The problem about taking the Hollywood is, of course, that the second copy of the Air Forces has appeared. If he doesn't take one of those, then A440 has the chance to deny the Air Force from him, which on the other hand is maybe not even that relevant because Kyshantry is that low in science, but let's see if he will take that revolutionary idea, which could also be an extremely important technology. Kyshantry, for now, being willing to destroy one of his mines, thanks to the Suez Canal, with now even 3 colonies, he still has some very solid resource production left, builds another cavalryman, and with that has an amount of strength that makes him definitely safe from an aggression. Takes the Hollywood, and yeah, A440 has to do something now, but Kyshantry up to this point hasn't revealed any H2 tactics, won't have any Air Force available, so yeah, it will be very interesting to see if A440 can pull something off and punish Kyshantry potentially in the military, or if Kyshantry maybe has now somewhat stabilized. A440 seats, opens the National Pride, revealing that before Kyshantry at some point might overtake him, scoring him 5 culture, making sure that he maybe still has a somewhat respectable culture lead. He will increase his population with the frugality, activating Maria Theresa again. Builds another religion to have enough happy faces with the urban growth that he took at a turn before, takes the Air Force, and I guess he will also take the revolutionary idea, which is a nice card for himself, but also a very important denial from Kyshantry. With Kyshantry having committed to the Hollywood, he doesn't have the option to go for the Manhattan Project now, but I still think it maybe is a gamble that he has to take here. Kyshantry takes the military build-up, which could give him some very much needed resource, make sure to deny the military theory, takes the endowment, and there's of course still Gandhi in the game, so let's see if Gandhi will be revealed and if maybe he could help Kyshantry to not be hit by a war. The problem is, of course, for Kyshantry, as we noted at the beginning of the game, there are no synergizing leaders for the Hollywood, meaning that could potentially hinder Kyshantry from making that Hollywood very big. He takes the multimedia in hand for now. If he gets the second copy of Revolutionary Idea, maybe there's a chance that he could build 1 multimedia in addition to the operas that he is having. A440 again seeds. He's the player who seeds a lot, and of course that also basically generates him some additional culture. He opens the Cold War, 6 additional science I think is quite big for him. He disbands units of warrior, plays the patriotism, goes for the Air Force actually already, builds one, is now at 37 strength. Let's see if he will again take the Revolutionary Idea, plays the Revolutionary Idea for now, and then takes the other one, can now easily go into an H3 government form. And when we take a look at the culture, he still is quite a lead, so with maybe seeding those events, the National Pride, he has managed so far to keep his culture lead. Kyshantry plays the endowment, getting a bit closer in culture thanks to that. Has the Hussars tactics, not the ideal one, but still, yes, it is a tactic that he can make use of without needing any additional technology, so that is maybe a win for him. Let's see if he will deny the fundamentalism, which could potentially help A440 to go for some military pressure. Losing the theocracy though, which gives him actually 2 happy faces thanks to the St. Peter's Basilica, would actually cause some issues for him here. And so Kyshantry is willing to let him have the fundamentalism, instead making sure that he has himself more resources and military actions available. A440 again seeds. The arms industry is revealed, giving Kyshantry more resources. And when we take a look at the event deck, all of those events were seeded by A440. Let's see how good the events are that he has drawn, or how nice he prepared for those events. And also let's see if he still tries on building up more military, or if he will maybe make a switch, maybe go for engineering in movies or something. Maybe he could take Einstein in hand or something and develop 2 or 3 technologies until the end of the game. He will increase his population first of all, getting again value out of Maria. He will indeed go for Einstein, plays the revolutionary idea, takes the engineering, builds an air force, elects Einstein and takes the efficient upgrade. Is now at 47 strength, so Kyshantry might have to follow up again and maybe destroy something. But there's also Gandhi now in the role, so let's see if Kyshantry is willing to take him. Who knows, maybe he could even finish the Hollywood now, which him using the engineering genius could be an indicator for that, or he just wants to make space in his hand and then still get the culture from Bach on top of that Hollywood, and afterwards switch to Gandhi as A440. At that point, can't declare any war, as the next turn will be his last chance. He also can't go for any aggression, so I think that looks like the best thing Kyshantry could do in this position. Just finish the Hollywood now, switch to Gandhi, and then maybe he could have already overtaken A440. Finishes the Hollywood for 24 points, not a very big one as we sometimes see it in 2-player games, but still a very solid one. He will then go for Gandhi, takes the urban growth, takes the reserves, plays the reserves with taking all of those cards. He also makes sure to anti-age, meaning A440 doesn't get any more draws, will lose 2 yellow tokens. I guess that doesn't affect him that much, but maybe getting 1 more draw step could have potentially helped him. And with that, Kyshantry is now at 130 culture, and A440 will of course get 1 more turn now, but it might be that he won't, that Kyshantry at this point has catch up to A440. The problem, of course, being A440 is the player who has seeded 2 impacts, and Kyshantry has some bad impacts. So he might need a very good one for himself to maybe keep that culture lead, like impact of colonies maybe, potentially impact of culture if he can keep the culture lead. But let's see what A440 will do first. H4 starts. This time he actually doesn't have something to seed, and that could be a bad sign because he doesn't get any new draws. Maybe he also just wants to delay the 1 seedable event that he has to potentially prepare better for some of those H2 events. But nonetheless, it could also be a sign that he actually doesn't have any more impacts. And if Kyshantry then is a good one, that could certainly lead to him having a position potentially with some advantage. A440 will go for the multimedia, can use the efficient upgrade to go for an upgrade, still leaves him with enough science to potentially go for something like democracy at the next turn, even though Kyshantry might just take that card away as he maybe doesn't have too much to do with civilization anyway. He doesn't have something to seed. That could be a problem for him. I mean, he has gotten some draws also with the strategic territory, but looks like he doesn't have any impact that he wants to push now. Increases his population 2 times, builds a religion, builds another religion, increasing his culture production, takes the democracy away, the movies away, and the professional sports away, so also not allowing A440 to maybe develop 2 more technologies with Einstein. He can still go for the communism, but then has to do something about his happy face, because you will now see a very big drop in happy faces when A440 will develop that communism, because with the St. Peter's Basilica it will actually cost him 3 happy faces to go for that communism. So let's see what he will do to deal with that. Probably just build a bunch of more religions, destroy some things, builds a religion. At this point, of course, he has the full knowledge, so he knows exactly what impacts he needs to prepare for and which impacts he doesn't need to worry about. And also, of course, he at this point already knows if it will be enough for him or not. Going to the final impacts, it will actually be quite close. A440 is now 10 culture production, or even 11 after building that printing press, and that actually means that before the final impacts, both players have the exact same amount of culture, but I would be surprised if A440 has now 2 impacts seeded by himself. That will actually allow for Kyshantry to gain the lead here. Let's see if that will happen. I do think it looks very good for A440 at this point. And we have the impact of technology. Kyshantry actually not having a single technology developed, with being very low in science for basically the whole game. So A440 getting a very big boost for that impact. And then there is the impact of competition, which is not as big, but also gives +3 to A440. And with that, the game has finished, And we have our new Through the Ages world champion. A440 has won the 2-player game, and with the good results that he had in the 4-player games, he managed to do it and won this world championship. So very big congratulations to him. He definitely goes for some very exciting gameplay, skipping some iron or coal upgrades, going for some military play, and so now at the end he is a very well deserved winner. So very big congratulations to him, an amazing achievement, being able to win that very big tournament with over 1,000 players participating. But also congratulations to Kyshantry for winning the silver medal. Also an extremely big achievement, so even though maybe it feels a bit bad for him when he had come that close to winning the whole event, but I think he can also still be very happy about the run that he had, maybe especially considering that he wasn't really among the very big favorites to make it to the finals or something, so he certainly was maybe a bit of a surprise for some players seeing him doing that well, and so also congratulations to him. Yeah, so A440 went for that printing press, theocracy, managed to get a strength lead, had Eleanor, Maria, didn't want to wait for those culture leaders, and it worked out very well for him. He started building some knights. First I thought he had hussars, but it was already a preparation for the mobile artillery. And Kyshantry went for Bach and Opera, but he had a big culture lead to overcome, and even though he didn't really get punished directly by the military, he still always had to make sure to keep up, and then he also maybe missed out on some draws, which probably was very relevant, as maybe with more good impacts for him, things potentially could have looked different, but I think A440 was also better prepared for the majority of impacts. Alright, with that, we are at the end of this year's World Championship. And I hope it was interesting for you following along at the beginning of the tournament with myself involved and showing my games, and then starting with the semifinals, showing games from the other competitors. And the World Championship for the next year has already started. I will be participating starting with stage 3, and I think I will very likely, as already starting with that stage, cover my games again. And so congratulations again to both A440 and Kyshantry for some very great tournament results. And then thanks for watching, you all. Have a nice time and see you in the next video.